Hi everyone, welcome to C3 Day 2. This is the first live workshop, so it's a bit more casual. We're looking to hear from you today. We're looking to hear your comments, and this is the Content Trends and Predictions in 2021 workshop. So I'm really happy to be here with you today. My name is Hannah Whalen. I'm the Content Strategy Lead at Conductor. I am a B2B content marketing strategist for tech brands, and I'm really thrilled to be here today with JD Metz of ClearVoice.
Thanks, Hannah. Hey, everybody. Good to be here. I want to thank Conductor first and foremost for inviting ClearVoice to participate. Really excited to talk to you guys about content today. As you can see on the slide there, that's what I looked like 4 years ago at my wedding. You can see my face. That's what I look like now. Hopefully it's similar. Got a couple kids now, so maybe I've aged a bit. But nonetheless, with ClearVoice, we're a content creation solution for marketing. We're actually a Fiverr company who's a publicly traded company based out of Tel Aviv, Israel. And plenty of you probably know who they are. We really serve as the premium content solution under the Fiverr umbrella. So content is what we do. Happy to talk to you guys about any content challenges you're having. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat. Make this as conversational as possible. But Hannah and I are going to talk to you about, like she mentioned, trends and predictions and some ways to stay safe when it comes to content production in 2021. So we're going to get started here. First things first, the content landscape. So what's happened in 2020? What's to come in 2021? And there's some pretty incredible stats that I'm sure all of you could assume had happened with COVID-19 and the global pandemic, really keeping people at home, keeping people away from trade shows, and all the peer-to-peer interactions that were driving marketing activities for so many years have really gone away. And what that's done is forced people, consumers, and brands to really shift to digital. As you can see here from these stats, 70% increase in web browsing alone, 61% increase in social media consumption, and a 30% increase in online purchases. When this has happened, it's really forced marketers to scramble to content and to digital. We've talked with a lot of brands that really didn't focus much on digital. And now when we take away those avenues of creating interactions with consumers like trade shows, peer-to-peer meetings, brands have really said, we need to focus on digital, and how do we go about doing that? A lot of you guys, being that we're here at the Conductor Conference, it's all about SEO, you're already in digital. But this is what's happening as a result of COVID, and it's only increasing the competition in the landscape around content. And we need to be very cognizant of that and make sure we're doing everything right when it comes to content and SEO to make sure we can outperform the competition.
Yeah, this is huge. This is something we've been seeing over the past year. Brands are significantly ramping up their digital presence. Their websites are more important than ever. They've been thinking about this, and now they're having to really invest in content, really invest in their presence online in order to be found, because we're shopping online, we're eating online, we're doing everything online now, and in order to meet customers where they are, brands have really had to ramp up their online presence.
Thanks, Anna. And to add to that, this next slide really shows what's happened in terms of sales and just online consumption in the past year. Ultimately, 10 years of growth occurring since COVID, really kind of illustrating how much more active people are being online, stuck in their homes, and we expect this change to continue. People have really adopted this new way of life of focusing more on digital, and that's from a consumer perspective as well. People have become so accustomed to being in their phones, on their laptops, that we don't expect that to change. It may revert some, but this new way of everything happening digitally is going to really seed itself, and we'll have to think more about content as an avenue to capture these users.
Yeah, for sure. And brands that weren't thinking about this have completely pivoted their strategy in order to make this happen, because they're seeing these trends, and they're looking to meet their customers where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that we've noticed is just kind of on top of what we just mentioned, a rise in content investment, but more importantly, and I'll kind of just read these slides and we'll talk about them. There's brands out there that are dedicated, and their whole business is around creating these massive resource hubs that accelerate their digital footprint in search. And they're really all about being content businesses. So as we think about that, and especially as you as brands and marketers think about that, we need to kind of step away from our business competitors, the companies that provide the same service as us, that provide the same product as us. Yes, there are competitors, but there's more out there. So that second comment or statement, success is not competing with those who provide the same service or product, but those who seek to inform your customers with meaningful content experiences. And with these brands, you can think about a NerdWallet, right? NerdWallet, they're not a bank. They don't provide credit cards. They're simply a content website providing a lot of great usable information to consumers. Wells Fargo probably doesn't look at NerdWallet and say, we compete with NerdWallet. We compete with Chase. We compete with Bank of America, et cetera, et cetera. But they really need to look at NerdWallet and other websites like that as competitors, because they're the ones providing answers to the consumers and guiding consumers down the path that NerdWallet wants them to take. And just using them as an example, this is the case for so many different industries, and we could pull out a lot of different examples, but I think that one that probably resonates with anybody.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. We have a distinction at Conductor between your business competitors and then your keyword, your market share competitors. And those are the people that may be outranking you on page one, but they may not necessarily be in the same vertical, but they are coming up first. So I think it really is important to think about competitors, not just strictly in the business sense. And I think that's, you're spot on with that.
Yeah. So we have a question here. How has it shifted for the healthcare industry specifically? And I've had plenty of conversations with brands, especially really focused around COVID. And this is an instance where everybody has been so thirsty for information that a lot of the healthcare brands just want to be a leader in providing good quality information to those consumers that want to know, how long until you have, symptoms, all these different things about COVID. When should you get tested? And there's been so much information, good or bad, on the internet that these brands want to establish themselves as being a leader. And that really comes down to who's creating your content and how do we make sure that content has a lot of utility and it's authoritative. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation in this session, but with healthcare, it's really been, we need to have people that are experts in our space writing our content so that we're authoritative in providing good information for users. So hopefully that answers the question we had there in chat a little bit, but really a shift towards being thought leaders instead of just, here's what we do as a healthcare provider or someone in the health industry. It's more about leading the way in terms of providing good, useful information for consumers. So I'm just reading through some of the other questions here. Maybe we'll get to some, but keep throwing those questions in the chat, guys. We're going to get back to some of them that we'll save as we go through this. But please feel free to just shoot them in there and we'll answer them at the end. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about emerging trends. Like I said, I spend my days at ClearVoice talking to brands all the time about what do they want to do, how is their strategy really built around content, how do they want to interact with their consumers, and what does content mean within that ecosystem. So these are just some of the kind of things that we extract from those conversations. And the first being a lot of brands talking about this hub and spoke approach to content, or some people call it pillar and tent post, whatever you want to refer to it as. It's really this idea that you have a central core piece of content, which would be the hub of the wheel, as you can see in that image. This could be a white paper, it could be an ebook, it could even be a long form 2,000 word skyscraper blog post that you want to do a bunch of research around. But ultimately, that core piece serves as the foundation for all the spokes to revolve around. And spokes in this case with content are other assets that you can use as lead-ins to that more main hub piece of content. So it could be social media posts, it could be other supporting blog posts, it could be email copy, video. There's all kinds of different types of content that we can repurpose from one main piece to make our jobs a little bit easier and more efficient when it comes to content creation, because we can never have too much content. So as you guys are thinking about content, we want to kind of decide what's a core concern of our customers, what's something that they really need to know about. There's a lot of search volume around. We know there's a lot of questions. Maybe we go to Answer the Public or some of these other tools, and we see that really there's a lot of conversations around the topic. How can we create a great piece of content around that topic in the right medium, but then also leverage all that information to create supplementing pieces of content that support it? So think about that as you guys are going through content, but a really great strategy that we hear from a lot of brands, and that we actually consult our brands to take that approach, or our customers, because it's just a better way to connect your content assets and make for a more seamless journey for your consumer.
Definitely. Definitely. In content, repurposing is everything. It's how you get the maximum return on investment for the research you're doing. But I think what is important and new here to think about is really the customer journey, right? So thinking about different pieces of content to reach customers where they are. Maybe they're more on social, maybe it's video. Thinking about the different mediums that you can reach your customers, whether it's a white paper geared to more of a business client towards executives, and then, like I said, social. So I think that that's something that we really want to think about, where to reach our customers. And we're going to hear from MoreVisibility in a video on that right now. So let's play that video.
Strategy at MoreVisibility. And I'm MoreVisibility. Hi, I'm Christina Zara, Vice President, Brand Strategy at MoreVisibility. And I'm excited to talk to you today about trends and content and keys to success in 2021. A lot of times when folks hear the term content, they automatically think text. And so really we have to retrain our thinking, get past that unconscious bias, and start to think more holistically about content going far beyond text to be anything that we as a brand will publish online. And so let's think about multimedia, video, audio content like podcasts, maybe different types of visual widgets or process graphics that show steps and stages of something that we're trying to educate an audience on or explain to them. Our audience has all kinds of topics that they're interested in, and they want to consume content that isn't just via reading or textual basis, but also by watching, listening, and experiencing. And so it's very, very critical that we think about all those formats and layer that on top of our content strategy and our content planning, to not limit it to just what topics are they interested in, but also how will they consume that content and what will be right for the audience. And when we do that, one other thing that's critical to overall success is having great measurement in place. So having very clear analytics and tracking on how folks are interacting with different pieces of content. Not just is the content driving traffic, but are they actually completing the video? Are they listening to an entire podcast? Are they backing up and rewinding? Are they starting over? Are they exiting at certain points in the content? And that can help us over time to be able to both align not just the topic to the user's interest, but the format that we use as well, so that we can get the most out of every piece of content we create.
Awesome. Great little piece from Amsive Digital there. Really, really helpful just to think about all the different ways to consume content. and what content is appropriate for what stage of the journey that they mentioned there. Want to get into a couple questions that we've got in the chat. Dustin asked what helps with scaling high quality content. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, Dustin, so bear with us here, but we're going to get to some recommendations that'll help you guys with content creation. Andrew says that we've been seeing a lot more blog articles in the search for e-commerce related queries. Good observation. We've been seeing this for a little while. Google's really rewarding websites that serve a lot of information. We see a lot of aggregator websites that pull in products and offerings similar to an Amazon, but it happens across a lot of varying verticals. But ultimately, the more information you're providing a user or the more options, a lot of times you're getting better on-site metrics with time on site, click-through rate, things like that, which is going to help with your rankings. But also that additional content and long-form content, especially when it's blog articles, Google's just rewarding those websites lately, even on those e-commerce queries. So a lot of brands will create a guide to hiking shoes, right? And it's a 1,500-word article about all the different hiking shoes that you could purchase for different applications. And the intent is to rank for hiking shoes, which is clearly a purchase e-commerce query. But the content in this case is really allowing Google to create a meaningful relationship between the query and the content experience that's being delivered through that content. So also a good way to think about for e-commerce brands, how can we create a useful blog post around a purchase query to maybe get us to rank for that query and introduce users at the top of the funnel, mid or bottom, to our brand, and then give them avenues within that content to navigate to your purchase areas of the website so they can make considerations on your product. Let's keep going here. I know there was, okay. Christy asked, should spokes also connect or link to other spokes? Absolutely. So in this case, we want to make sure that we have the most connected set of content assets as possible that really is just meaningful, right? So if we have a blog post that's a lead into a white paper, if that blog post mentions something along the way that's appropriate to another blog post or references another blog post, let's link to it. If the user wants to kind of dive into that other topic, they can follow that link and then read through that. You're also passing link equity through internal linking on your site, which is going to help with your SEO. So a lot of value comes there, not just from the user side, but algorithmically from Google as well. So let's keep moving here. Go to the next slide and talk through some of these other items that we have. We went through the MoreVisibility video. So another big thing that we've really recognized is this shift from marketers to start thinking about content as their brand. And every digital experience is your brand, not just on your website, but how you represent your brand in search with your title tags and your meta descriptions. That has a brand component as well. So really thinking about not just we need to blog for SEO or we need to optimize our service pages so that we can rank for these queries. We want to make sure that everything we do is really centered around our brand guide and is consistent across every experience that we have through our user journey.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this one is huge, right? So it's basically a redefinition of what content is. Content is your entire digital presence across the web. It's every single digital asset that comes up when someone Googles your brand. What's the first thing that comes up? So it's your social profiles, it's review sites, really critical review sites, the answer box, of course, everything that comes up in the SERP. And then it's also, you know, YouTube videos. It's really everything that comes up. And it's really important to think about the universal brand message that that you're putting out there for your customers. And I think that this shift is something that we'll continue to see through this year and certainly for a long time to come, because it's really big.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. And I see a couple questions here. There's a little conversation going on in chat around creating content for B2B and B2C. This is definitely challenging, especially when brands address both audiences. And the main thing here is really to define who those audiences are, their need states, what queries they're searching, and have good personas built around those audiences. You guys likely already do. And then segmenting your content experiences to those audiences and making sure that if a B2C audience comes and lands on a piece of content that ranks in organic search, that the avenues they have to navigate will continue that B2C experience and try to limit how much they can fall into the B2B experience, because a B2C consumer obviously might get a little lost if they start going down the B2B path. So first and foremost, creating those audience personas, making sure you know who they are, making sure you know and differentiate what types of searches a B2C audience is conducting versus B2B, so on and so forth, and then build your strategy from there, really segmenting those different behaviors of audiences. Hopefully that's helpful. We can dive into that some more, but I think personas is the best place to start there. So another thing that we've been seeing a lot is just authorship and credibility. These content brands that we mentioned before, who are investing tons in creating these massive content assets. We talked about NerdWallet, there's plenty of others. You'll notice if you go to these long form articles that there's authorship by, if it's a medical website, doctors, a health line or something like that we see in search all the time. They have a doctor who's reviewed the content, and Google's recognizing that, and so are users. And it's also ensuring that your content is really accurate and really meaningful to the consumer. So there's a lot of different components that happen here when we talk about authorship and the credibility portion. If we get the right people writing our content, A, it's going to reduce the amount of time we have to spend in revisions because they know what they're talking about. Two, when we attach that authorship to the page, we have Google Eat algorithm signals that are going to be influenced there, so it's going to help us rank. And it's also going to add some trust when consumers come and see that piece of content. So start thinking about who's reviewing, who's writing your content, how are we presenting their credibility to the user, to Google in that piece of content, because a lot of brands are doing it and it's working.
Yeah, this is a really important one. I think when we talked about this, we used the term digital footprint, right? So it's about creating a digital footprint that your users can follow. And a lot of times this means elevating people in your organization, like leaning on existing resources that you already have, because there are people, and maybe they're not writers, but they've got great ideas and they're willing to share them, and you can help them build that authorship, build that credibility over time, so that your users can find them, usually with an author page or something along those lines, something where they can be followed over time.
Awesome. And that kind of leads into the second or the last bullet here: remote work, increasing access to talent. We don't have to look in our city, in our neighborhood of where our office is anymore to hire people. There's so many opportunities out there to find global talent and the right person to help you with content. There a lot of times brands say, well, we want somebody sitting in a desk here because they need to learn about our business. They need to understand our brand voice. They need to understand our value proposition and really absorb everything. Very important that happens. But starting with somebody who already knows your industry very well and writes about it all the time will fast track a lot of that learning and allow you to be able to do it in a remote fashion. So as you're looking for people to help with content, a great way to do that is really accessing this more readily available global market that we have now, especially influenced by COVID. I want to answer a question here from Carmen, who asked, small D2C product brands, what kind of hub content would you recommend? Thinking about jewelry, for an example. So I think a good example here would be, diamonds, right? There's so many different aspects and things about diamonds, about how you evaluate them, the cut, the clarity, all these different things. You could create a long form hub piece of content around how to evaluate a diamond, and it could be 2,000, 2,500 words, and have images about cuts and different shapes and clarity and all the different scales. But that allows for just a massive piece of content. And then maybe your section about cuts links out to a supporting blog post that gives examples of diamonds that are these different cuts, right? So now we have a spoke around cuts. We have another spoke around clarity. We have another spoke around accessories, whatever it might be. But that's one way to think about what's a really broad topic that really needs a lot of explanation, and use that as our hub. And then all the different facets of that explanation can be our spokes.
I just want to add to that because we also recently did a report on a very similar topic. And actually one tip I can share, a great way to do this is to go into to the top sites and go into their navigation bars, right? And you can, like exactly as JD said, cuts, colors, like you can find those different kind of spokes very easily if you go in and you see what other people are doing, and it's often right there on their website navigation. So that's my small tip.
So next section, we're going to get into some content pitfalls, and leading into this section, we really want to think about what are barriers, what are challenges, and then what are things to kind of recognize that you might be thinking or planning a path that we've found lead to problems with brands when it comes to content. So first and foremost, a big challenge that we see all the time, and have seen this for quite a while now, is this idea of siloed or disconnected marketing teams. And this has gone on for decades, right? Brands build a content team, an SEO team, a social team, a web team, a PR team, and typically these teams don't talk to each other. And I've heard it over and over again from brands and marketers that, they have their own marching orders, their own budget, and these things we don't really get involved in. If we can eliminate those barriers, really bring those teams together, that hub and spoke model that we talked about before becomes much more usable, right? Because now we have this hub piece of content that your social team can use if we have social posts for it, that your CRM team can use if we have emails to lead into that PR can use if you create a case study or something around the application of that hub piece of content. So try to break down those barriers internally. When you start talking about your hub piece of content, if you want to take that approach, talk to the social team, talk to the paid team, say, hey, here's what we're doing. How could you guys leverage this? What do you want us to include in it? And now your content not only has more utility across channels, but it's also going to provide a more consistent and seamless experience for your users, because they're seeing very similar voices and tones, very similar approaches, and everything's connected in a way that makes it just very consistent and comfortable feeling for the user instead of a notchy experience as they move through your content.
Yes, this is so key. I would say if I could impart one message to you guys, it would be coordination between everyone who's touching your digital assets. Your content teams, your web teams, your SEO teams, they need to be talking. They need to be aligning and ensuring that you create that seamless experience that JD was mentioning. That's the way to create high quality, high ranking content. You need your strategies to align. And way too often we hear that teams and processes are disconnected, and it's inefficient, and it doesn't lead to great content. So if that's a problem, tell us about it. You should be talking to other teams on a regular basis and coordinating.
Absolutely. Next point here, no streamlined process or solution. Really, the content process just consumes marketers' times, and opportunity cost is massive. If you guys manage content or have had the experience of managing content, I'd love to see in the chat how much time you think that takes up for you guys that have had experience managing content production. But ultimately, what we find is SEOs or marketers who have content on their plate, the management of that, finding writers, creating briefs, doing the revisions, the hand-holding, the editing, rewriting, educating the writers, it takes a ton of time, and marketers sometimes don't realize how much of a workload that is. So we really want to make sure as we go into content creation, we have a streamlined process, we have a solution that isn't going to take all of our time, unless we're fully dedicated to content creation, which I know some people are, and that's great that there's that commitment. But really making sure that we have buy-in and we have a process so that our job and our primary responsibilities aren't going to suffer because we're spending too much time creating content.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say that this is like a next logical step from the first point, which is like align teams, equal agility. So when COVID first hit, the brands that were left scrambling weren't prepared, weren't aligned, but there were some brands out there that were well positioned. They were well positioned and they got the content out there in a timely manner, and they were the first ones that you heard from. So this is really key.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat here, Nancy, way more than it should. It takes up so much time. So you guys definitely understand that content itself is a full-time job. In fact, Mackenzie said exactly that. So as you're thinking about, hey, we need to get into content, really be mindful about how much effort it's going to take. There's all kinds of resources out there. You can visit ClearVoice's blog. It'll give you a lot of guidance, but ultimately, content isn't something that you just, hey, let's write some blogs. I'll create some briefs and we'll find a writer and it'll be easy. We'll talk more about that in a minute here, but definitely something that needs to be thought of, because we don't want to sacrifice what our normal day job is to create content. So next bullet here, keeping up with changing customer needs and providing continuous value. So when we think about SEO, right, there's typically a set list of keywords, our keyword portfolio, our keyword universe, whatever it is that's evergreen, that our consumers are always searching. And oftentimes, if we exhaust that keyword list with content assets, we start running out of topics to tackle with SEO. So keeping up with these changes, if there are any, or giving yourself a reason to continue creating content is really important. And I know Hannah has some notes on how to kind of go about that.
Yeah, I think what's really important is that you need to be data driven and using insights to continuously iterate to make sure you're keeping up with your customers. There's been a ton of changes recently, some COVID, some not. Customers always changing regardless, but continuously optimize to ensure that you're keeping up with your customer. That means looking at the data, looking at KPIs, and ensuring that you're continuously iterating on them so that you understand your customer inside and out. You're using those insights so that you can really get inside their head, even if they're changing, even if times are changing, so that you can keep providing them with that value.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going through some questions here, and I saw a good one. Let me scroll back. I think I missed it. More effective to build more pages with new content, or should we focus on refreshing, updating? Great question, because both are really important. We need to look at, the position of existing content and how well it's performing first and foremost. So if we have existing content that's bottom of page 1, top of page 2, it's in that striking distance, and we have the domain authority, we have the page authority to compete at the top of the SERP. Who is competing there? What does their content look like? And how do we compete with them toe to toe? If the answers to those questions guide us to add content to that page, meaning the top 5 rankers have 1,000 more words than us, then absolutely we should focus on refreshes there. So take that as a case-by-case scenario, really evaluate your ranking position, evaluate your competition and your authority metrics associated to your page and your domain against the competition to determine whether or not, is it just links? Is our content good and our page authority, our link equity is holding us back? Or is our link equity there and we just need more content? We need to update this, make it a more robust experience in order to start competing toe to toe with those top rankers.
I think, JD, to keep time, we're probably going to save the rest of the questions for the end and kind of run through the next section.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
We love these questions. Keep them coming. We're going to be.
I love the questions. Thanks so much. So some red flags to look out for. And this is really, if you find yourself saying these things or thinking these things, take a bit of pause because we've heard these all the time and we've talked to brands that have gone down these paths. And it ultimately ends up in their content machine just not really working out that well. So First, a writer should be able to look at our website and know how to write for us. That's not the case. With writers, we need to be very explicit about how we define how they should write for our brand. That means a very defined set of brand guidelines, voice and tone, messaging architecture, personas, everything that they can look at to get a really clear understanding with no ambiguity. This is the brand I'm writing for, and this is how I need to write for them. So as you're thinking about hiring writers, getting freelancers, if you don't have that stuff as a foundation, you need to get it done, because when you pull these people in and just say, hey, look at our website, here's some posts, that's the way we like to write, you're going to end up spending more time on the back end rewriting and revising their content, because it's likely not going to meet your expectations. The next one, if we create a ton of content, we'll have SEO success. A ton of content is great, right? We would love to create a lot of content for our users, especially as it's geared to keywords and to SEO, but there's so many other facets we need to think about. Off-page SEO, for one. If you're a small brand and you're competing in a competitive space like jewelry, we had that example earlier, content isn't going to get you all the way there because you have these competitors that have massive domain authority. Pick your battles with content. Find pieces that are going to be less competitive. The barrier for entry in search is lower. The pages that are ranking don't have a lot of links to them, and really be strategic about what content you create rather than just trying to boil the ocean with as much content as possible.
I think when it comes to SEO, it really is at this point quality over quantity. I feel like there's a huge misconception that just getting a ton of content out there or keyword stuffing is the way to go, but that's not the case anymore. Google is really looking for quality. And so if that means, you have to balance your cadence with your quality, it's really key.
Yeah. So next comment, we'll optimize for our content after it's written. Of course, you can adjust and edit your content and make sure it's optimized properly, but we want to be thinking about the SEO components ahead of time. We need to have our keyword research done. We should have a framework for our title tag, our meta description, our headers, H1s, H2s, what keywords should be saturated the most throughout our copy or what is prioritized, and then make sure to provide that guidance clearly to the writer. And hopefully the writer has some SEO background where they can do a good job. But we don't want to just give a writer a content brief that is a topic and some of the points we want to touch on, and then optimize it after the fact. That optimization isn't going to be all that fluid, and it's going to create a piece of content that doesn't read as well as we would like it to. So think about your SEO first before creating copy.
Yeah, there's no SEOing a piece of content after it's created. You need to have an integrated strategy from the start.
So a few more comments here. It shouldn't take more than a few days to create and publish a blog post. With all the feedback we got in the chat a little bit ago about it's a full-time job, I think everybody here gets that. It takes so much. We have to do the brand guide that I created. We have to do our content briefs. We have to do our keyword research. We have to lay the foundation or the structure for how that page is going to be optimized. We have to find, onboard, and educate a writer about what you want that piece of content to be. And then when it's finished, we have to go through an editing process and kind of optimize against what the output of that content was. So if you're thinking about, I can take this on, shouldn't be that difficult to create a few blog posts. If you want it to limit the workload on your side, it's actually going to take a lot of work to set it up properly on the front end. So I can manage our content production on top of my other responsibilities. We hear this all the time at ClearVoice when we talk to brands. I started creating content and I'm spending 20 hours, 30 hours a week just managing content creation, and I have all these other things to do. So when you're thinking about content, really make sure you have the available time or the team available. And I saw somebody in chat earlier said, we built an entire team around content production, and that's what it takes. So don't fall into this, I can just add this to my responsibilities and get it done, because something will suffer along that path. So once a piece publishes, the job is done. We talked about refreshes before. This kind of goes onto that, not to waste a lot of time, but we need to evaluate and optimize content performance. Look at how it's ranking. Did it plateau and stop at position 12? What do we need to do from there? How much time on site do we have? Where are people clicking through to? Is this piece of content leading to some kind of action that we want on the site? Whatever the answers are to those questions should guide you on what needs to be done with that content after that. So when you create your content, come back to it in 2 months and 3 months and see how it's performing to guide what you need to do with that content later.
Yeah, you really need to be prioritizing, measuring your content and build a shared roadmap with all of your teams. We have now a video from Amsive Digital, formerly Path Interactive, and they're going to be talking about measurement with us.
You're probably looking at keyword visibility reports, opportunity workspaces, traffic dashboards. To really understand how digital content is contributing to your bottom line, measure content holistically with these 3 keys. Expand beyond rankings to include engagement. 1. Expand beyond rankings to include engagement. You also can't just optimize for rankings and traffic. Overall website engagement to know if your content is working. This also means digging in to understand how well your audience remarketing pool is performing and how much engagement you're getting on social media. Successful content drives real brand growth by getting in front of the right customer at the right time with a message that works. Number 2, measure content coverage across the entire customer journey. Map content to every stage of the customer decision journey with user journey maps. These work to quantify your content coverage, showing you gaps and opportunities. Software like Conductor's content mapping tool are great for this. You'll convert new customers more efficiently with content programs that support users through every stage of their customer decision journey. And finally, number 3, use different goals for different stages. Though revenue is always the ultimate end goal, it's often a lagging indicator of success. You should have various leading indicator metrics for content supporting different stages of the customer journey. For example, awareness content should introduce and position the brand for new users. Look at reach and engagement metrics for this. Do people remember your brand? Then your awareness content is doing its job. Looking at first touch assisted conversions is a great way to understand if your awareness content is generating qualified leads later on. Keyword qualified. When it comes to consideration stage content, think about evaluating your social media audience and email list growth as indicators for success. These buyers are closer to the point of purchase, like what you have to say, and want to hear more. I hope this got you thinking outside the box when it comes to content measurement. Happy creating!
Great little video there from Amsive, just about, how to evaluate content. So I'm going to keep moving on here, guys. I know we're just a few minutes left, but the last piece here, and I appreciate all the great questions in chat. The ClearVoice team will be in our booth following the sessions. So if you guys want to come back in and ask some of those questions, they're happy to answer. But for this last section, just some things to keep in mind about building your content machine. We have to deliver value, right? Google is all about providing the best experience for the user for any particular query. So as we think about our content, and maybe we're SEOs, we just want to rank. In order to rank, that content has to have a lot of utility and a lot of meaning to the user. So as you're thinking about production, think about who's creating it. Think about all the research that needs to go into it. So that piece of content really stands out and is something you guys can be proud of, and your audience will find meaningful if they land on that page. So a few keys to success here that we drew up. Define your brand and audience personas. We talked about this a little bit. Define that brand voice, all of those things that are going to guide your content, as well as personas, because if you don't, the content you get back as a result isn't going to meet your expectations. You're going to end up spending more time. Second, the writers have to be knowledgeable. No more generalists writing on technical subjects, right? We don't want somebody who's just a writer by trade, or they're an English major out of college who's going to come in and write your content about back-end web development or, medical content just by doing some research and kind of Frankensteining a piece of content together based on what they can find. Our audience can sniff that out. They know it's not written by an expert, and we're not going to succeed as a result. So make sure the people writing your content are knowledgeable. This could be in-house subject matter experts that you have. There's other challenges around that I'm sure some of you guys have run into. But first and foremost, we got to make sure we have the right people writing content. Second, buy-in and workflow between teams and stakeholders. I know I saw a question there in the chat about how do we streamline process with multiple stakeholders. First and foremost is just getting the buy-in, them knowing that this activity fuels our marketing and we have to move quickly. We can't have things get bogged down. If there's any way we can pull those kind of permissions off of their plate and empower other people that have more availability to give the approvals, that's great. But ultimately providing a system that moves through the process of approvals and revisions as quickly as possible to get that content published. And that all starts with getting buy-in. So talk to teams, tell them how meaningful this content's going to be to your organization, show them examples, show them search volumes. Any type of forecasting is a great way to do that. Next point, really thorough and SEO informed content brief. So each piece of content needs to have a guiding document just like your brand voice does. We call them content briefs at ClearVoice. Those include everything from what's the topic, what's a brief synopsis that you want the article to be, any main points, who's the audience persona, what need state are they in, what stage of the journey, what do we want them to take away, is there a call to action, what keywords are we optimizing for, how should the headers and the title tag be structured. All of that should be defined when you hand it over to a writer, because that's the only way you're going to get a piece of content back that doesn't have to go through 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of revisions. Number 5 is test and optimize. It's not just for conversion rate optimization and paid media. It's also for your content creation process. Test a writer, optimize your content brief templates, update your brand guide, always evolve that process, because evolving the process in your guiding documents and the expertise of your writers is going to make that machine work more seamlessly down the road. So we don't want to get into a set it and forget it with our process. Make sure that the creation process is optimized as well. And then finally, content's an investment, and it's a commitment. We have to, again, going back to number 3, we have to get buy-in, and we have to prove that creating content in this new kind of post-COVID world is going to be one of the main avenues for communicating with our audiences. And the content we create is the vehicle to do that. So investing in it and committing in it, not just we're going to try content for 2 or 3 months, this is the sprint we're going to do, but it should be, here's our plan for the next 6 months and 12 months. The next 2 years, we want to create this many pieces of content, and we want to really be present in these channels. That's where it all starts, and really thinking long-term about content rather than just testing. If you go in and say, we're going to write some blogs and see how they perform, and then we'll evaluate from there. It's compounding, right? It's a hockey stick when it comes to content. So the more you add to it, the more it will pay off, and you need to have that commitment on the front end to reach those results.
Yeah, that's really well said. Thank you so much, JD, and thanks so much for talking with us during this webinar. We really appreciate it. Thanks for all your guidance. Everyone, I put my LinkedIn, and you can head over to the ClearVoice booth because the conversation is going to continue. And be sure to stick around for our tips and tricks next webinar. It's coming up next. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much, JD.
Thanks, everybody.